Well, welcome to this collaborative conversation on congregations and copyright law. This conversation originated out of a class I provided for the Administrative Professional Association of the Presbyterian Church USA about a month ago. And we realized I probably could share some of the learning I had done and the preparation I had done outside the presbytery with our presbytery. So that's what we're going to do. I took a much longer presentation, tried to boil it down. Hopefully, I believe I've covered everything. Hopefully there aren't some gaps in there that are in my mind clear, but not in yours. So if there are, you can use chat, or you can even interrupt me and say, hold on a second, where are we going? Or where have we been? Or what stop did we just run through without you explaining where we're going? So just really quickly, let's see, make sure my slideshow will work. Is recording started? Yes, I just end up putting those in there so I don't forget. Just a quick disclaimer that information in this presentation is for educational purposes. It is not to be construed as legal advice, because I'm not an attorney and I don't want to be, brought up on charges for impersonating an attorney. So, but I think we're going to have a conversation. I am going to provide, at first it will be fairly content heavy on my part, but then I want to open it up for all of you to say, here's what we think, here's how we are trying to work on these problems. Earlier, I presented this information in a series of probably emails early in the pandemic on some of these issues, and there were people that were saying, Paul, but what's the solution? You're sharing the problem, but not the solution. Well, sometimes the solution is challenging, but we've been around long enough. I think we found some workarounds, and hopefully you have some as well. So with that, let's get into copyright and how that applies to churches. So really quickly, what is copyright? Essentially, a type of intellectual property that protects original works of authorship as soon as an author fixes the work in a tangible form of expression. So once I write a poem down, that's a tangible form of expression, right? You could probably touch that piece of paper. I can, someone can. It's theoretically tangible or practically tangible. I have a copyright to the poem without doing anything. Now, once I register the copyright, then I could sue you for unlawfully making a copy of my poem. So you can have copyright, but not be able to really enforce it, at least in the United States, until you have registered your copyright. So in some ways, we're going to be somewhat general here, but that's going to hold. So copyright essentially is going to protect a creator's original works, poems, melodies, films, photos, drawings, etc., by granting them exclusive control over how their work is reproduced, distributed, and adapted. And so when we're trying to use someone's original works, if they have exclusive control over it, they need to somehow give us permission to do that. And there are ways that they do. Now, copyright isn't forever. In the United States now, copyright doesn't apply on things copyrighted at least 95 years ago. They're now in the public domain. So anything that says copyright 1930 on it is in the public domain. Was it copyrighted? Yes. Is the copyright enforceable? No, it's in the public domain. So you can photocopy or project the words and lyrics to Amazing Grace, I think that's a hymn, without a worry in the world, because Amazing Grace was written in the 17th century, and the music as well is from that era. So a little over 95 years ago. So you can do that, right? Or can you? Well, the words to Amazing Grace are over 95 years old, but what if you sing it to the tune of the Ballad of Gilligan's Island during worship without getting permission? So you wouldn't have to get permission from John Newton, who wrote the lyrics. It would be challenging at this point to do so. But this tune, there are people who have done this before, sung an old song to a new tune, and they would be able to do that without getting permission. Or could they? because the Ballad of Gilligan's Island, I don't think that's been 95 years yet. I know it was when I was a kid, and I don't think I'm old enough yet for it to be 95 years. So this is where it gets a little challenging, because sometimes people will do things, or somebody will arrange Amazing Grace with their own arrangement that they then copyright. So as a choral piece. And then how do you get permission to do that? You may need to ask permission. Now, there was a law that made it very easy for churches to work with copyright. So first, let's note the verb tense. The law made it easy for churches, but then technology intervened and made our lives richer and more frustrating all at once. So it was easy for churches over 100 years ago, let's say, when they probably didn't have a mimeograph or photocopy machine or a projector. They most likely 100 years ago did not have a website or live stream. And someone told me I should just give a caveat that sometimes my humor is very dry. So yes, I understand that 100 years ago is not only likely someone didn't have a website, but they did not. All right. So there is an exception or an exemption in the copyright law that says this, that for churches or for religious in worship, you have certain exemptions. You can the performance of a non-dramatic literary or musical work, or of a dramatico-musical work of a religious nature, or display of a work in the course of services at a place of worship or other religious assembly is not an infringement of copyright. So this law made it quite easy because, and we'll talk about this, but as long as you are performing, singing or playing, oops, I went forward faster than I wanted to. Music. Well, let me go on to the next slide. I think. So I broke the statute into two parts. The first part is the performance of non-dramatic literary or musical work, or of a dramatico-musical work of a religious nature or display. So pretty much any book, poem, or song could be used in worship, unless it was of dramatic and not of a religious nature. So it was some sort of secular play or a musical, even if it had, often that people would argue, well, it has an underlying religious theme, like, God's everywhere. Well, no, you most likely couldn't use the religious exemption for something that wasn't designed as a, religious drama. But if it wasn't dramatic, if it was music, you can play that in church, and it still works. Still works. The issue becomes now, because we're live streaming, we're recording our services and then putting them on the internet, that creates an issue here. So that's the what of what you could use that was copyrighted. Even though it was copyrighted, you could use it in worship. And then where and when had to be in the course of, it has to be in the course of services at a place of worship or other religious assembly. And this is where the law is a little more, it's more challenging today, because it must be a religious worship service in a religious assembly. Okay. It can't be a recording of a worship service that's then distributed somehow to other folks at other times. You can't say, well, our church is doing a fundraiser or a special concert or an educational event, and you can't broadcast it. Say, put it on Vimeo or YouTube or even Zoom, even if you assert that the Holy Spirit unites the church on Zoom. That may be true theologically, but legally, that is, I am told, that is problematic, and that may not get you very far. So I just want to sum this up. 100 years ago, this law covered pretty much everything churches were doing. You want the congregation to sing, you purchased hymnals, enough for everybody or enough for people to share. The preacher quotes a poem by T.S. Eliot from the 1920s. Well, as long as it isn't in one of his plays, you're okay. You want to live stream? Sorry, the internet isn't invented yet. For those of you who appreciate my sense of humor, originally it said you want to live stream. Sorry, Al Gore didn't invent the internet yet. All right, so we're almost through with my part of it, and then we'll open it up to discussion. So I just wanted to talk about some frequent copyright violations. First, the misunderstandings. There are copyright exemptions for various groups or various organizations or institutions, but they don't all apply to the church. So a lot of folks in our churches come out of education, and they know that educational institutions can make copies of copyrighted material for educational purposes. Now, this exemption doesn't apply to worship at churches. And it doesn't apply to even to like the Christian education department of a church or their offerings. And people will say, but that's educational. Yes, the courts realize that's educational, but they say that's not for churches, that's for educational institutions. You're not an educational institution. A church says, but we have a day school. And okay, great. You have that exemption for your day school, but it doesn't carry over to other activities of the church over at your worship services. So that's where often I think, at least in my experience, people would say, well, I know what copyright law is because I work in a school. It's like, yes, you know the exemption for the school, but you don't know the exemption for the church. It's different. And I say at the bottom, insert public domain duck image here, which was if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's a duck. And actually, I went on the internet and grabbed an image, and then I thought, ooh, that's not good. I have no idea who owns this image of a duck. So I just decided I would remind myself and all of us that we have to be very careful with copyright. Find a public domain duck. All right. So I'm just going to go through these really quickly. We can always come back to them or talk about other things. But here's a copyright violation. A church purchases a copy of a Bible study book. They make 10 photocopies of chapter 1. Well, you can't generally, I mean, it depends on the Bible study book, but normally there'll be a copyright that says you can't do that unless there's express permission in there that says you can make copies of this book. Generally doesn't happen with Bible study books that I have. Not that there aren't some that don't. Or here's another one. A church owns 100 hymnals and has 50 people in worship. So the church says, well, we have the hymnals, but there's some people that don't want to hold a hymnal and they can't read it. So we're going to make enlarged copies of the hymns and the songs because then people can see and read them. I used to do this all the time at my church. I thought this was perfectly acceptable because we had more than enough hymnals. We were just facilitating for some folks the ability to see rather than them having to use a magnifying glass. We magnified it for them. Well, we were making copies of hymns that in many cases we couldn't make copies of. In some cases we could because they were hymns over 95 years old. Or you can make extra copies of music for members without a license. The choir often does this. There are different ways, and some folks here may know more about the musical ways that some music allows for there are different restrictions, different ways that publishers and others have tried to make their music more easily accessible for choirs and other musical performances. That's not an area that I know real well, but these are frequent copyright violations, part 1. Part 2, you have a license that allows you to reproduce or project music and lyrics for worship songs through a big clearinghouse. So the big clearinghouses that are most common are one is One License, the other is CCLI. But you might reproduce a song that isn't covered through that clearinghouse. So a lot of folks, you just assume like this music service has over 500,000 songs in it. Clearly, anything that I can think of will be in that, be protected under that license. Well, it's not always the case. Where I've noticed it, especially for the Presbytery meetings, when we were working on licensing for our Presbytery meetings, was often service music or choir anthems, things like that they might even be a familiar song, but once you realize that the copyright was held by someone outside of CCLI or outside of One License or outside of both, then we had to do some work to try to figure out, had to write a publisher or whoever held the copyright to see if we could get permission. Here's one. A church reproduces a copyrighted poem or book excerpt or picture in the bulletin or in the church newsletter without seeking permission. So here's 2 actual examples. A daughter wrote a thank you to the church after her mother died. She quoted the poem, The Dash, and it was put in the newsletter. Well, the newsletter was accessible through the website. Somehow, perhaps through a bot or some other way, the poet discovered that the poem was being used without permission in a church newsletter, and the poet successfully recovered damages. I'm not sure how much the damages were. This is one closer to home. A church made a flyer for a Bible study, which included an image downloaded from the internet that was owned by Reuters, and that flyer was on their website. Well, Reuters found the photo somehow and recovered $700. They'd asked for $1,400. The church hired an attorney. The attorney charged them $300, so it cost them $1,000 for an image. It wasn't that exciting of an image, was the really funny thing to me. I thought, wow, I mean, I could have taken a picture that looked like that, but that's irrelevant, right? It was under copyright. It was a legit thing. There are people out there who are probably also asserting they have copyright and trying to extort money from churches, but this was a legitimate case. And so it cost a little bit of money. And it was a very small church. It was a church of about 20 members and a church that actually one of our Korean churches. And so it was fascinating that somehow someone found this on their website and said, hey, you owe us money. And then here's one. A church has a license to reproduce music for use in worship, but doesn't have a license covering live streaming or posting the recording on the web. So that's another layer of maybe they're reproducing things, they're photocopying music or projecting it using a projector, but they don't realize that you need to have a license to cover live streaming or posting recordings on the web. So there are a lot of ways in which copyright can get complicated, and it all depends on what we're doing, what our religious service looks like. Is it just in one place with no recording, no video? But post-pandemic, most of us now are in this reality where we're recording, we're even live streaming, or we're putting it on our website and archiving it. What happened? I'm going backwards. Okay, so let's talk about some solutions, and then I'll open it up here. But for music copying and broadcasting, there's the CCLI Church Copyright Service and one license. Neither of these is comprehensive. And again, there are many choral arrangements and arrangements of service music that aren't covered. So you have to check, and if not covered, you seek out the copyright owner for permission, maybe allow, I don't know, up to 4 to 6 weeks, depending. A lot of times it's much quicker now, especially with the internet or with email. I would say a couple things is people often ask which service is better. And who's that? Okay. It all depends on the kind of music you're using. The CCLI tends to be more, I guess, mainstream American or English-speaking contemporary music. One license has some of that, but it tends to be more global. Probably has more from like Roman Catholic and other sources, where CCLI might be more independent church, Hillsong, more evangelical churches. Those are broad generalizations, but they may hold. So some people, like for a while, the Presbytery had both. And then at one point we went to one license. Interestingly, right now, the Presbytery isn't using one license actively for any of our Presbytery meetings, except we have recordings of all of our Presbytery meetings, including worship. And we've decided to leave those on our website. And so rather than trying to eliminate copyrighted material from all of those recordings, we have just left them on as they were recorded. And so we continue to have one license so that we can continue to post things that have copyrighted material in them. I guess in 95 years, we could decide that that was no longer needed, but I'll let someone else make that decision. I plan to not be your clerk in 95 years. And I am. So the Glory to God hymnal is somewhat complicated, and maybe people can help with this. The hymnal obviously allows you to sing from it in worship, provided the service isn't broadcast. Once it's broadcast, or once you decide to project hymns, it gets more complicated than you might think. So there's an online version of Glory to God. There's also a projection version of Glory to God. And you'd think, oh, great. Well, the online version, I can do anything online. Well, that's not really what the word online means. It allows many songs. That's the second point there, but not all to be downloaded and reproduced. You'd think, well, I got the online version rather than buying hymnals. Well, maybe that was a good move. Maybe it wasn't. It gets really complicated at this point. But maybe the songs you want to download and reproduce are covered by one of those licenses I mentioned earlier. The projection version, it seems like, oh, here's a version designed to be, used with an overhead projector, or whatever we call the projectors now. It similarly allows for many, but not all of its songs to be projected. So they actually have these tables and things you can look at that will, what did I want to see if I can show that? Oops. Oh, thank you. I'm not sure I'm sharing what I want to share here. I'm going to make sure I am. What happened? Oh, here we go. So I don't know if you can see this, but here's one way that you can use the Glory to God. And actually this copyright holder index may be different depending on the version of the hymnal you have. And also, by the way, this I believe is somewhat dated. So there might be hymns that were copyright, say 1930, that now are in the public domain, that might not show up as public domain here. But for instance, Holy, 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 Lord God Almighty, many people know this fairly obscure hymn. It's not obscure. Many of us know this. There is a copyright for a descant for the Korean translation. So a lot of it is in public domain. I believe here the issue is with the Korean portion of it, which is, there's a copyright holder. The music works, of course, because music and lyrics are different. So sometimes you can easily get permission for the lyrics, or maybe that's public domain, but maybe it's a new hymn tune, or vice versa. It's an old hymn tune with new lyrics. So if we look at number one, that's a little bit complicated. Number two is Come Thou Almighty King. So it's in the public domain. Both the text, you can see this column here is text. Oops, that's not going to work for me. But you can see that the fourth column from the left is text. And it doesn't matter for CCLI or one license. You don't need a license for it. And the music as well is what I want to say, public domain. So as you see, you'd have to go through your Glory to God and figure out which songs you needed permission for or didn't need permission for. And fortunately, they put in the two most common licenses there. So that helps unless you have a different license. But I asked around a while ago and I said, are there other licenses people have? And I didn't hear of any. So that was just last month. So if you know of a different license that's working wonders, let us know. I'm going to go back to this. I'm going to go back to sharing my other screen, which I was hoping just to share the screen, but that wasn't working for me. So, oops. Anyway, I'm trying to complicate things here, so we'll have a nice, robust discussion. So stay tuned. So for video, a lot of people are using video in their services. There's a CCLI has a license called CVLI, which allows for use in worship and often beyond worship, as I understand it. People may have used that. I believe it allows you to use it even for community events in some cases. I'm not real familiar with that. Now pictures, when you're putting pictures, this is maybe, well, it could be in worship for a bulletin. Maybe you're projecting a picture that you are then putting on the internet in your live stream, or in your newsletter or something else. What do you do with these pictures? Because again, I had that example of a Reuters news story that had a picture that someone had grabbed on the internet, and then this church saw it on the internet, thought it was a nice picture. They didn't grab it. They got it from somebody else who was probably violating the copyright, and they assumed they could just use it. So they had it in their newsletter somehow, which was on their website, and 6 months later, they're not even aware, they're not even thinking about that newsletter, and someone goes, hey, you have this copyrighted image. So if instead they could have subscribed to some sort of service that provides pictures that are licensed for your use. Canva is a program that some of us on Presbytery staff, don't ask Sherry or me too much about Canva. We use it, but we grumble a lot about it. It's probably more about us than about Canva. We just don't use it enough. You can take your own pictures. I think this is a really creative solution. Let's say you need a picture for worship and someone says, hey, we really ought to have a picture of Crater Lake. That would be amazing and would really help us. Well, you could say, hey, I'll just drive down to Crater Lake and the church can reimburse me at 70 cents a mile. I can stay, get some lodging down there, to have a few meals. That sounds like a really good deal, maybe if you want to go to Crater Lake, but that's probably over time going to be cost prohibitive. You can also find public domain images, and here, there, especially folks who work in church offices, often know a lot of great places to get images that are in the public domain or that they can use because their permission has been granted. All right, I'm going to open it up now, and I saw a couple cool things in the meeting chat that I think will help us talk more about this in a more robust manner. Thoughts? And I don't know. Let's see if you can use the raise hand icon or raise your hand. That might work best, just because there's a bunch of folks here. We'll see how that works. So anyone want to open it up with a comment or tell me how I got it wrong? Did I see a hand? I thought I saw a hand. Okay, thanks, Sherry. I don't know if you're all watching the chat, but
Rick Kroll
has a hand.
Has his hand up.
All right, let's start with Rick. Hey, Rick, good to see you.
Good morning. Say, is there a way we can get a copy of your slides and text? I mean, I've made a few notes, but I couldn't write down as much as I wanted to write down.
Well, my slides are copyright and I'm not giving out permission. Sure, Rick, I'll send them to you and I'll send them to everyone. Maybe I'll just assign the copyright to Rick and Rick can tell you all whether he'll let you use it or not. How's that? No, I'll send it out. So I've got all your emails. I'll send that. I'll send a couple other things. I think Dennis Smith, I saw he was on the call earlier. He provided a fascinating resource on copyright that comes at it from a bit more of a theological perspective and a global perspective that I thought was really helpful. And I was planning on putting some of that in there, but I realized I think it's a slightly different way than a different presentation that I wanted to do here, but I'm going to commend that to you and I'll put that in an email as well. Mike.
Yeah, Paul.
Is that Mike Schiffer? Yes. Hey.
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah, on your last slide, when you were talking about glory to God, it said songs are okay if not streamed. So if we are streaming our worship service and only doing glory to God's songs, but we do not have any sort of licensing, then we're in copyright violation. Is that what you're saying?
In some cases, yes. If
right.
Particularly right, if the music is if those things are still under copyright, protected by copyright law.
So you need that index that you showed us, and where do you get that?
There is I pulled it right off the internet.
Okay.
And I'll put that in the email to everyone. So yeah, I think if you even look for like glory to God copyright, it may take a couple of clicks to get there, but I'll send it to you so you don't have to do a couple of clicks.
Thank you.
Yeah. See, Matt Johnson is next.
Hey, thanks. So I think we were generally aware of most of these things. My internet cut out and I had to rejoin, so I might have missed some of your presentation. But well, I did miss some of your presentation. May have missed an important part. What we do to let the bots know that we have a PowerPoint license or a one license or the GIA or whatever is applying to it is for every song that we sing, we have a PowerPoint slide which has the specific one license, the specific license that applies to that song, and we put that on the video, in our production so that this is all connected. and it is a large amount of minutia work to do all of that. And I'm wondering, is that necessary? Can we just put up one time that we have this service, or can it go in the, tag on our like the more info on our YouTube video? What is the process that is required to, you've got the license, but then how do you use it in the most efficient manner is my question.
Well, thank you for bringing up that question, because I realized that I got rid of all the stuff about how you notify or use these services. In some ways I was thinking, I guess, well, let's not go that deep, but that is a good question. Like, how do you have to do it for every song? Do you have to do it for one song, or can you do it for once for your service? Wouldn't it be great if you could just do it once annually, sort of like filing your tax return? And I don't know the precise answer to that question, but I'll bet there are folks here who do. And I also forgot about reporting, or I neglected to leave that in there. What do folks do? And we won't forget Dan or Terry, but what do folks do in terms of how they, I guess, publish the fact that they have a license? I see Eileen had a hand. Do you have one for that?
If you look in the terms for one license in CCLI and the usage on the website, they give you a template and they give you some choices. You can have a summary slide at the end of your presentation or video or whatever, or you can put it at the end of each song. And I have just found it easier to have a little line down at the very bottom that lists the information, but they have a template on their website.
So you're saying you can do the summary.
You can do a summary screen, the summary slide or two, whatever, at the end, or you can do it at the bottom of each hymn.
Okay.
Need the
And they give
specific
you a
information on each song. It's not
Yes.
it's not just saying we have one license, but it's listing the information on each song.
Exactly, because one song could be covered by CCLI and the next song could be covered by one license. And the next song could be covered by you have received permission from the author because they're not going through a licensing company.
So Mark and Eileen, because I saw Mark, you'd raised your hand too as well. So you're essentially saying that at the end you may have a slide or two, because instead of just saying, hey, we've got a license, or we've got every license in the book, so I imagine everything's covered. Instead, you have to say, well, we had 4 hymns and 3 songs. So for 7 things, you have for each one the particular copyright information. That I'm seeing people nod. So yes, so at some level there is some minutia involved, right? Like we just can't get away from that.
Yes,
But it's really easy
annoying.
if you have the online hymnal. It's really easy. At least according to our office manager, she just cuts and pastes it right into the slide each time. And of course, once we've sung a hymn once, she's got that saved somewhere that she can put it in another service. But it's all the information is easy to cut and paste if you have the online hymnal.
All right, great. Matt, did you have a follow-up, or I heard someone else interject there? I wanna make sure.
Just complaining groan
Okay.
that we're paying them money. Why do we have to tell them all this? Just like put it on there. I paid you the money. There's the thing. Like we've got the license. Why do they need all the minutia? It doesn't make any sense to me.
I think it's not so much the license, it's people itself, but those who the licensed folks have acquired all of these copyrights from various people that I believe want to see that or want to know that, rather than.
Nothing. I think it's godly to acknowledge the people that are involved in producing a hymn. I don't think it would be fair to them if we just said we have the one license and go from there.
Mhm.
Well, we put all the author and the person who made it and all that. We've got all that information on there, but then it's just to have to hunt down all the other details and which one goes with which. There's no one who cares which license the publishing company is associated with.
Except the company that you report it to. and they care.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because that's how the authors get their royalties.
And yeah, we didn't even get into reporting, which is important, but I want to just sort of summarize what we heard from Matt, Mark, and Eileen to say you should do it grudgingly. And what was the other word I was going to use? Mark gave me a word. I was going to use it. Now I lost it. Anyway, you should do it because it's the right thing to do. Dan, we'll go back to Dan because he's had his hand up a while. Dan Fowler.
Hi. One thing I do want to mention, we actually did have copyright police, whoever the heck they are, call us out on asking if we had one license or CCLI. What we do is we have a slide we put at the beginning of our presentation that says a general copyright information, what we carry. And one particular Sunday, they didn't see it. And so we got an email literally the next day. So if you're questioning as to whether or not they're out there, they're out there. But it's interesting, we don't have to, because we have the Glory to God online as well as the PowerPoint version, we don't have to put any information for each piece of music. I believe we also have GIA, which is another good copyright to have, particularly if you like Taizé. And then the other thing I'll just mention, I have a friend who is a composer and he writes anthems for choirs. And it is a huge issue, choirs copying music on their copying machines. And what happens is the people that write that music, they don't get their 3 cents per copy or whatever it is. And that's how they make a living. So I just want to reiterate, that is stealing. Please don't do it.
Thanks, Dan. Terry from Westminster.
Hi, we use the hymn search feature on PCUSA website. That gives us the hymn that we could download, but it also shows all the copyright information, and it will tell you whether you need a license from one license or from CCLI.
Great. So that's the hymn search feature.
Yes, and it's at the PCUSA website.
Okay. That's good to know. I'm not sure. I think I may have seen it, but I've forgotten what it looks like. So, yeah.
And it's really easy. You just put in the hymn number.
All right. Let's see. Others. And I know some of folks that work with choirs and others, have you found this more challenging, or are there shortcuts, or is that just you just build that into the amount of time you're going to spend as part of the work? When I was with the administrative professionals, by the way, they were asking me, whose duty is it according to the PCUSA Constitution to report to one license or CCLI? They were hoping there was actually some like definitive rule in our Constitution, but of course there isn't. You know, those things have to be decided by churches who's going to do what. But any thoughts on that, like, or anything that I've missed that you could say or misrepresented?
Paul, I still have a few questions if you're moving on.
All right. Hey, well, let's see if I'm gonna ask. I see GB put his hand up first, but then I'm gonna get to you, Mark.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
I figured I was in line, but
well, I just want to say that this has kind of encouraged me to plan my choir anthems more months out. When we buy music, we buy 15 copies for our 10-voice choir. 20 years later, we've got 3 copies left and it's out of print. Technically, I still need to be in touch with the publishing house. Practically speaking, 100% of the time that I've spoken with the publishing house about this, they've said, make copies. So, because we bought them originally. So this is more a matter of, I'm going to make a verb out of a noun, paper trailing, so that when I have my anthem scheduled, I send a note off to the publishing house saying, this is out of print. We're going to use your music. may I make some backup copies to destroy directly after the service? They'll say, yes, I've got it on file. Life is beautiful.
Great,
I
that's really
guess
helpful.
that's the part that I'm taking away right now. The question that I have is, we have a band here, and I use the hymnal to write arrangements for the band. So the hymnal is my basis, the chord structure, etc., for writing arrangements for the band. But it's sometimes very close to what the hymnal says, but I have to put it in different keys. You know, the B flat instruments have to have a different key than the C instruments, etc. So I'm not even, that's such a gray area for me. I'm not exactly sure how that one teases out. Any thoughts?
I'll open that up to other folks because I don't have a thought on that.
Whoever wrote the words should be acknowledged. Whoever wrote the underlying tune should be acknowledged. And you would be acknowledged as the arranger, right?
Not sure, because I wouldn't think I would acknowledge them any more than I would acknowledge them for putting a hymn in the service. We don't live stream, it's strictly for the service. So, yeah.
That's interesting, GB, because you're right. And there are ways in which when I think people also have copyright over a work so that you can't slightly amend it, that you can't change lyrics.
Sure.
Right? You can't. So can you change music? I mean, even though you're maybe just changing the key or whatever, I don't really know the answer on that. Because yeah, I don't know. That it sounds like a really good question that is beyond my pay grade. I'm not sure if anyone here knows.
Okay. See, and this is one of those situations where you don't want to ask forgiveness instead of permission. You really want to know the answer before you
Right.
proceed. So,
Right. That's a really good question. Mark, we'll go to you since you had some questions you said. Fire away.
Get myself off mute there. Number one, we use one license, and that I inherited that when I took over the worship committee, and it seems to work fine. There's been just a couple of songs that we have used that I have not been able to find anywhere, and I haven't done a lot of other investigation. I probably should on those. But the weird thing about one license for me is when you report the use of a piece, you have two choices. You have a reprint service or a podcast service. And I just always check off both because I figure reprint would be printing the words on the slides and podcast would be like streaming and YouTube and all of that. But I was wondering if anybody else has dug into the weeds of that to figure out if I'm doing it right.
Yeah. Anyone have any thoughts on that? I think I saw. Did I see a hand? You're on two screens for me, so I clicked back.
This is Eileen. That's correct, and that's how they tell you to do that. I will tell you that I've had occasion to call the helpline or whatever at One License. They have been nothing but helpful.
Yeah, they were helpful with me the one time I contacted them.
Yeah.
And I would yeah. So
Yeah, so that you're doing it right. The words are the words or streaming of any kind.
okay, so that counts as a reprint if the words are projected somewhere, and it counts as a podcast if it's streamed
Anywhere.
anywhere. Okay, got it. That's what I figured. I figured reprint would be the same thing as if we put the lyrics in the bulletin and but it's projected on the screen instead, right? So that yeah, okay. So that's good to know. My other question, and GB was referring a little bit to this too. Our choir does anthems, and we have ample copies of each song that they do that have been purchased, but we live stream our services and put them on YouTube. Does that mean we need to get an additional license for choir anthems? Because I don't think those are going to be in one license.
They're in one license usually, a lot of them.
You know, it's been interesting. There, some people have said, oh, they're almost always in one license. And there are other folks who say they're never in one license. I think it all depends on what your choir's singing, right? So it's hard to say, but there are a lot of them in one license. It's just that, again, nothing has everything in it. So
Okay.
it'd be interesting to, to start running that and figure it out.
Okay, well, that's something I need to work on then, because I haven't been putting our choir anthems in one license because we don't project the words,
Right.
and it's a performance. It's not a congregational singing, but we do stream it and we do put the recording on YouTube. So
Right. And that's the traditional way to do it, right? Before we were live streaming stuff, that's exactly what the copyright exemptions permitted. I know I have Lyle and Cynthia, but GB, did you have something on that particular point you wanted to?
Yeah, I just grabbed a song that we purchased a few weeks ago. And it says in it that copyright, 1943 and 1970, all rights reserved. The CCLI, in big letters, the CCLI license does not grant permission to photocopy this music. Boom. And then it gives the publisher's information where we can get in touch with them concerning that. I came, it was interesting you said that about educational world, because I came to this job from being a choir director at school. And the rule was that we paid money for this. That gives us some rights. It does not give us rights to sell tickets to listen to this music, but we can perform the snot out of it. So I don't know if that's still true here.
Yeah, and that is a distinction between educational usage and church use, which you're like, of course, we're churches. Part of what we do is educational. But my
No.
understanding of the law is that's not how the courts see it. That's not how the law was written. Yes, we know you do education, but you are a church. You have your own exemption. It is different and distinct and not at all the same as the educational. I mean, it might have overlap, but you can't use that one. So
Right.
that's where it gets
The
confusing.
thought, though, is that we spent money on the paper, and for that money, we have the privilege of owning the paper.
Right.
that's
So yeah, and I guess I'm probably, yeah, I think I hear your question a little differently. When you're doing it in worship, generally worship is not a something where you're charging admission. I think
Right.
once you did charge admission, it probably wouldn't be considered a worship service, but I don't know that. Once you start saying, hey, we're having a special concert Sunday evening, and there are some weird uses I understand in copyright law that may allow for that, that I've read about. And it's always like, well, this is something where you need to hire an attorney to let you figure out, whether you're what side of the line you're on. Because you're right. Sometimes like nonprofits are able to use even like secular music and so on in their fundraisers. But there's some line there that I'm not entirely clear on, and I tried not to get clear on it because again, I'm not an attorney.
is there
I
a
think that-
difference between a free will offering at a Christmas concert and charging tickets to a Christmas concert?
I think, yes, there probably is. But I would say that if you are having a worship service that you're bringing the community to, maybe call it that. I think once you start calling it a concert, then you're going to have to argue you're under the religious exemption. But again,
if it's
this whole
not-
other exemption, you're right. There's this whole other exemption that I think churches might be able to take advantage of. And now I realize that it might have been more helpful if I had done some more research in terms of what that looks like, or brought an attorney on to talk about that, an IP attorney.
But it seems like if there's not tickets being sold, and if you're not live streaming, then the purchase of the paper copies should be sufficient to do a performance, right?
I'm not quite clear what performance it is, but if you're in a worship service.
Okay, it has to be in a worship service. It doesn't.
Well, that's how the law is written. Yeah. So.
Okay, because and so otherwise there would have to be an additional license, but beyond the license for buying the copies.
Yeah, there'd have to be some way you get permission, but I don't. I didn't know we were going to go down that road, so I don't know a lot about it. So I better not say yes or no on that.
Okay.
Let's move on to Lyle, since she's been waiting patiently. And if you unmute, we'll hear your
Sorry
voice.
to monopolize things.
No worries,
I'll-
Mark. You're good.
No,
You're good.
no.
We'll see you around.
So we are not with Glory to God. We're with the green hymnal, whatever the heck that is, and the Presbyterian hymnal, which is ancient now. We do not we Zoom, so we live stream, and we also put it on YouTube. We don't have PowerPoint, so we don't put two words up on the screen. So are we, and we've got a CCLI license. Are there any concerns with just saying, well, we got CCLI so we can put it on, so that we can put it on our website? Or
So,
do
and
we need to?
Yes, perhaps. So I can't remember exactly because I'm not as familiar with CCLI, but I believe with CCLI, I mean, they have different licenses. They have one that's kind of the older license, which was you could basically project it in worship. And there's another one that allows you to, I don't think they use podcasts.
We are paying the extra that because we're streaming.
Okay, so if you're paying that, it sounds like as long as the songs you're singing are covered by CCLI.
Okay,
You're-
so we'd
you're
have to do a
fine.
little bit of research and make sure that these are covered by CCLI.
Right, and you
we
can
don't
do
have
that on the
and we don't
CCLI
have a
site,
choir
right?
at this time, so we're not doing weird music that's out there. However, sometimes the pianist does a prelude of some sort, and I need to make sure that she is not pulling something out of like the Beatles Imagine would probably not be something that would be okay for us to be posting on our website.
Right, that could be that could create a problem.
Okay, that could be a problematic if we don't. I mean, if we pull it out of the hymnal, then we should be okay. But if we get it from the common sources, then we might be trying to figure out how to get permission for that.
And you do have to report to CCLI or one license what songs you're singing. That's how the
Yes.
writers get compensated.
Yes,
So
yes,
hopefully
yes.
you've already been researching which ones.
We get they send us a questionnaire that we're supposed to report everything we've done for a 3-month period.
Right.
So it's a sampling rather than every single week, but and I say we have to have the preludes included in that that we're doing.
Well, that's something I'm going to have to think about too, because we have a pretty master pianist who does pretty fancy stuff for preludes and postludes. So lots of jazz. So,
So
Yeah, it's worth looking into, isn't it?
yeah, it'd be good to
so it's like,
figure out.
okay.
Anything else, Lyle?
So basically, I think because we're not putting words up, then and trying to figure out how to put a picture at the end of our stream saying we're covered by CCLI, I'll have to figure out how to get that included in our tube post.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
But other than that, since we don't put the words up on anywhere, they're not being streamed.
Got it.
And of course, no singing got the Gilligan Island tune.
There's always next
Or-
Sunday.
Or
Lyle, there's always
House
next
of the
Sunday.
Rising Sun.
Oh, there's
the
another
that
one.
My pastor likes singing too. Okay, good.
All right. Cynthia, thanks for your patience.
Yeah, thanks for your dry sense of humor. We do appreciate it. The other service that we should probably look at is ASCAP, and that would cover, Lyle's John Lennon songs and so forth. If it's okay if I share my screen, Paul, I can show you ASCAP.
Sure. I may have to. Oh, yes, go ahead.
I have power. So this is specifically ASCAP's licensing for churches and ministries. And this is at ascap.com. They have two. One is called Perform Music, and that is for the facility. So if you were to have, there are exemptions, the United States exemptions for worship, like you were talking about. But if you were to have a concert, I've had ASCAP contact me after a concert and say, "Oh, I understand you did a choral piece by Martin Lauritsen, and he's an ASCAP member, and so you need to pay." I said he told me I could, and he was there, and I still had to pay ASCAP for it. So that was that's the performance, the facilities license. Then the other is the streaming Worship Cast, and you can get both of them as a bundle. So I will just leave that there for you.
Hey, that's wonderful. Thanks. And what was I going to say? That probably covers, like, I think that covers, like, as you said, a lot of music that's not church music. So it's a pretty comprehensive license. Is that right? I mean, I think nothing's perfect, but it works for you.
Yeah, and that license, I think for churches up to 199 members is something like under $400 a year.
Is that right? Wow. Good to know. I did not know about that one. So thanks. Anyone else? I think Kelly has a hand up or 4 fingers up. She has 4 questions. Go ahead, Kelly. We'll see if
I
we
couldn't
can help.
find the hand emoji quick enough. So our big question is really around live streaming, sort of on our end in my congregation. It just from the collective wisdom, it is our sense that the ASCAP that Cynthia just introduced, like, really, is that the only one that's covering live streaming?
Well, so both CCLI and One License have a live streaming license. But I think ASCAP also has a lot of music that's not church music. So if you are playing the Beatles,
Okay.
something like that, and a lot of people are doing that, right? That might be more helpful. Cynthia, am I on the right track there?
Kind of. You can have CCLI like we all used to have it, and that doesn't include streaming. You have to add on the streaming part of it. That's extra.
And actually, ASCAP is the same way, right? It has a performance piece, and then there's also a live streaming or worship cast or whatever they called that.
Yeah. And to Matt's question there, when you click on that at ASCAP, they are having CCLI's parent company managing it with them. So they're actually working with them to manage it, but it's a different thing.
Right. And somebody, is there, let's see, someone said something to me on a different channel. So, oh, there was a question about citing copyright permission for images. And I know I can send you some things that I have, like samples of different common ways that people show a copyright for images, particularly in print material, or I guess digital print material. So which I think would also work for slides in worship if you were using copyrighted images. Some of it depends on if you are using a subscription service. They would have their own, way of doing that.
Paul,
Yes.
Mr. Barton had his hand up.
Oh, hey, okay.
Hi, I'm Jan. I have a question about a book, not about worship. I wrote a book about our stained glass windows, and the creators of the Povey brothers, I clearly wrote copyright in it, but I did not register it. How do you do that?
Oh, how do you register a copyright?
Yeah.
I've never done it myself.
Where you go?
Copyright is not registered. If you want to get it registered, it's called a trademark.
Oh,
Well, I think there's a way you can get your copyright. What's the language of that? I can't remember, but there is a way in which you file with whoever in the government, and then that gives you more legal rights. I'll
the
send you some
Library of
information.
Congress?
I think maybe the Copyright Office.
Yeah, I
Oh.
think there's a copyright office or something. I wasn't expecting that kind of question, so that's a good question.
I know it's off the worship topic, but definitely done for our church. So yeah. So from what you said earlier, I have copyright, but I can't do much about it if someone copies me. And there are parts where I go into the creators, the Povey brothers, that are very unique, and I don't want it stolen. So yeah, I need to know how to copyright it.
Sure, how to copyright it. There are services online. I'll send you something, but a lot of what I do, honestly, is I use Google to answer people's questions. So I could probably give a caveat the time, especially when we're talking about legal matters. That might not be the wisest.
So
thing to do.
maybe it's look up register copyright.
Something like that. Yeah, that might work.
I can do that. I thought you might know. Yeah, I tried to pay attention to it.
Could be a learning edge for me. Matt Johnson, yes.
Just a creative strategy. Maybe we could just tell them it's AI, and then it doesn't matter if it's AI, right?
So yeah, I mean, so AI is fascinating because, in a sense, things that are
this is
created by-
humor. This is humor.
Yeah, but things that are created by AI technically are not copyrightable. But that said, there have been times when AI has grabbed something and someone said that clearly is mine. And there's a defense that AI is trying to create something from a variety of things, and they've got algorithms that are supposed to justify that. But it's not ironclad. But yes, but you did. Yeah, I appreciate it, Matt. You were trying to make a joke, and I took the bait. So 1 point for Matt, 0 for Paul. All right. Other jokes or other things before we leave the meeting? I mean, there's some questions about. Oh, I see. It looks like Cynthia might have some information here about these licenses, and in the chat, some questions and answers that may answer some of your questions.
Yeah, so if you're concerned about also using secular songs, holiday songs, patriotic songs, those kind of things that are not in the hymnals or in the praise song books, take a look at WorshipCast and ASCAP.
All right, great. And I know, I think Amanda was on earlier. I don't know if she's still here, but Amanda from Mount Tabor, they had some issues with copyright with some of their tenants at one point, and got a notice from, I think, BMI or somebody. But so we were trying to work something out, and I don't know what she came up with. I'm not sure if she's still here, but she wants to interject. But
There's another post in the chat from Amy Delaney. What about quoting poems or blogs in a sermon?
yeah, that's a really good question. So here you are in a sermon, and again, the exemption for religious use works until you start, live streaming or recording. So I started to look in some of the poetry books I have here, and for instance, some say, oh, you can use portions of, you can quote portions of my poems in a critical review. Well, is your sermon critical? Perhaps, probably not. That's probably not what they're intending. Are someone going to go after you if you say, I commend a poem by, I don't know, Dorian Locke, and you give, here's part of the poem, like a teaser? I don't know. That's a really challenging thing, because now once you're in a broadcast environment, again, the law wasn't designed for the times we live in. where everyone is broadcasting. I mean, I guess due diligence would be to write to the poet and say, this is what I want to do. Many of us are writing our sermons late in the week, and many poets are sleeping, or, you know, it's probably not the poet. There's a copyright holder, right? A publishing house or something that is really managing this. As Cynthia pointed out, where an actual producer of material said, sure, go ahead and use it. And someone else said, well, actually, we have rights to this, so pay us something. So I don't know that that's something that really hasn't come up. I mean, I know there's been things where people have written down a poem on their website and they've been sued successfully. But if someone is preaching and quotes a portion of a poem or a portion of a novel, say, that's under copyright, I don't know where the line is on that. Eileen.
I've been careful as I've published or reprinted poems. We still do a paper bulletin. In the bulletin, I take it out of the bulletin when I put our bulletin on our website, so that I'm using it under the old exemption use of in the room only. I have often wondered that too, with the sermon usage and quoting something. I don't know. I haven't found anything that tells me what to do.
One of the insurance carriers had something about, you know, quoting a poem on a sermon that's live broadcast becomes a potential copyright violation. But again, I don't know more than that. You know, obviously you can go and ask people for permission for things, but at some point, if you're a really literary preacher that's remembering things early on Sunday morning, that would be wonderful. You might be in a challenging situation. Oh, Caroline, I saw your hand earlier. Sorry.
I just want to be sure. I heard somewhere in the conversation something about Taizé, and Westminster Portland does do a monthly healing and wholeness service using the Taizé books. We also kind of write our own service script for the service and prayers that are said to the whole congregation that's gathered. As long that service is not live streamed, and my understanding is that as long as it's not live streamed, we don't have to, you know, ask permission about using the music. It's all under the old rules. But I want to be sure if we like, sometimes we use Jan Richardson's blessings, and she basically says, you know, that you can use her art, just ask permission. And we use her blessings. Am I correct in my understanding that as long as it's not live streamed, we don't have to, and nothing, the service is not put up on our website or YouTube or any of those places. It happens in the room, and that's it. Is that correct, that we are not under special copyright obligations?
Assuming that you're not, you know, again, photocopying things that you're handing out, right? You buy one copy of something, a piece of music, and then you're making multiple copies. You're fine. The religious exemption is, as long as the music is played during worship, you should be okay.
Let me just follow on to that. You said as long as you're not doing a handout. Sometimes the person who's handling the music will put the response to, we will say a prayer, like a series of prayers for different situations in the world or for people. And then there's a sung response. And sometimes that is printed in the bulletin and that is handed out. Do we need to talk to her about that?
Well, I'm not sure what kind of license you have. You may have a license that allows for that.
I know we have one license. I'm just an elder for worship and music.
Yeah, and you're right. These get really confusing, right? Because there's often multiple layers to how these things happen in a church. So,
is there a separate licensing for Taizé? I mean, I'm trying to concentrate on what everybody's saying, and that was the impression I got, that there was something special for Taizé.
I think a lot of Taizé, I don't know if all of it is, but a lot of Taizé music is one license would cover that.
Okay.
But someone
I think
pointed
we
out,
have 2 licenses. I can't remember the other.
and I think Dan had pointed out that GIA specifically has, I guess, all Taizé in it.
Okay, GIA.
And I thought one license was really close to GIA, but I don't know their relationship.
Okay, I'll ask our music director. Thank
So
you so much.
What's wonderful about this conversation is that I was really well prepared for administrative professionals, but we've got a lot of folks coming at this from different angles that I wasn't ready for, and I had no idea I wasn't ready. So this is great. But I'm glad we have folks on here who have been helping us out. So that's why it's collaborative. Karen, I see a hand.
Well, I've just had a thought that we have a wonderful supply pastor sometimes, and he does a children's moment, which includes reading from Frog and Toad, and it is streamed. I'm just now wondering if that might need to be checked out.
Yeah, when was Frog and Toad written? That's not that old, is it?
No, I don't think it's that old. Anyway, we just need to check that out, don't we?
Yeah, and I wonder if I really have a great answer on that, but it seems to me that would be, when it's streamed, that creates a different dynamic. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a new thought. Thank you.
And it looks like Gail or the folks at Florence have hands raised. I'm getting an AI summary of what's going on, so go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, a little bit. Can you speak a little closer to the microphone?
Okay. What we're interested in is a concert that's being presented in a church. It is not a worship service, being presented by an outside group. Do they need to have a performance license for the music? Or if they've purchased their music from a publisher, is that good enough?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question. So this is an outside group using the church. We had a similar question come up that was more like, is the church responsible for tenants who have violated copyright law in some way? And the answer given by an attorney, which I won't try to summarize too much, was probably not, but there were a variety of facts and circumstances that might make that the case. So I don't know. I mean, in some ways, yeah, it's probably on them, but I really don't know the answer to that question. It's a really good question. I mean, it's fascinating, right? What we're talking about here is actually we have these spaces that we're trying to use and allow the community to use in ways that then create situations that probably weren't an issue before. If they were an issue, they were, who was going to come to Florence from some publisher? Not that this makes it right, and say, hey, like someone just sang this song or read a poem, and now I'm going to report you, and a bill will appear in the mail in 3 weeks. Please make sure you pay us $5,000 or something. But now it's a little more complicated. I saw a hand, then I saw Amy's hand, but Lyle and then Amy.
I'll get rid of them. Or was it up here?
I was just going to say that you should probably include in your occupancy agreement with the people who are putting on the concert to say that it's their responsibility to cover any copyright rules, and have that included in the agreement. That I sing in a chorale, and we always are very conscious about making sure that we have the correct permissions to perform the pieces, so that if we go somewhere, if we go to your church, you don't have to worry about it, because we say we've got that covered. So you probably just need to make sure in your occupancy agreement with whoever's coming that's on them to take care of it.
Good point. Yeah, I'm thinking about our standard lease at the Presbyterian, our usage agreement, if we need to add that. Amy.
Yeah, I just know that the rights for performing a piece where you charge admission is different than just offering it as like a recital kind of a piece. So just have people be very careful about that. And if they are charging admission, selling tickets, make sure they have the correct copyright permissions.
All right, thanks. Well, let's see. Anyone else? I'm trying to go to screen 0, and that's why I'm not seeing any faces. Okay, I'm going to screen 2. I'm not seeing. Have we
I've just
sufficiently muddied the
been
waters?
I've just been bouncing around about the poem thing because that's concerning. I use poems in my sermons.
Right.
And yeah, it seems like if you're putting it on YouTube, then that means you have to have copyright for the poetry that you are reading or book section or whatever. Like it's not covered. So that's concerning.
It is. And I think, and again, like it probably wasn't a big concern when the law was written, right? Because there wouldn't have been live streaming and you're preaching and you're using a non-dramatic work or whatever, and you're all right. But now we've got internet, so, and we've got ways to broadcast more easily. Well, thank you for coming. And I hope there was something of value here that you got, and appreciated all who contributed and all who showed up.